Potent Elixir. The skill triggers every time you drink a health or energy potion, and it provides flat regeneration numbers. It has 8 seconds duration of effect, and it can be very useful, especially to builds that need lots of energy to be able to cast very costly spells. The health regeneration also can be useful, but it would really be great if you also had other sources of flat health regeneration to add to this one and see a big difference. Overall a good skill, mostly for the energy regeneration. At maximum level 12 out of 12, both numbers are plus 25 flat. Essence of Jade. This skill requires at least 1 point to potent elixir. It provides 3 types of resistances and it has the same duration as the base skill. This one could be an optional skill for endgame builds because in many cases you would have enough resistances coming from gear, but for leveling up new characters it is a very good one. Especially the life leech resistance, which helps against enemies, including the big boss Typhon. Usually life leech resistance comes from not many items, so in case you don't have gear to provide it, this resistance alone increases the value of the skill, so just use it, at least until you equip great items and you won't need it anymore. At maximum level 8 out of 8, the numbers will be at 34% to all 3 resistances. Convergence. One more skill that is tied to usage of health and energy potions. At maximum level 8 out of 8, this one has a 27% chance to trigger, and when it does, it activates one of these 7 different potions randomly. Each potion provides different stats, and the important detail here is that all 7 potions exist as true potions in game for us to pick up and use whenever we will. The new potions drop only from containers in the new act of internal Embers expansion and have a longer cooldown than health and energy potions. This skill is totally based on random luck and it can be useful, but you will need to be lucky for the skill to trigger a potion that would benefit you during combat. You should give it a try and see if you like it, but to get the most out of it, you would need to max it out as soon as possible. For more details about potions, we will have another guide. Smoke Cloud. This is a crowd controlling skill that can stun or immobilize enemies. Stunned enemies cannot do anything, whereas immobilized ones cannot move, but they can still attack you from a distance if they use ranged attacks or spells. Leveling up the skill increases the energy cost of it and the duration of the effect. At maximum level 8 out of 8, the energy cost is 50 and the duration is 5 seconds. It is a good skill to have, especially if you play a close-ranged build, as it can help with survivability. Spending at least 1 skill point as you level up is not a bad idea. Shen Pao. This skill is like a bomb which you throw to enemies and it deals one of the 3 types of flat elemental damage: fire, cold or lightning. The chance to impaired aim means that enemies that use projectiles against you, such as bows for example, will not be able to target at you and they will not hit you. The reduction to enemies' health affects the current health of enemies, and it is actually useless against hero enemies and bosses. The good thing about this skill is that it has a very low recharge rate, which of course can become even lower if you equip gear that provides recharge reduction. In such a case you will be able to make a Bomberman build and have fun. Echoes of the Ancestors. Every time you kill an enemy with Shen Pao skill, there is a 33% chance for this add-on to trigger. This chance is fixed and will not go up by level. This is something like an effect that works automatically and hits enemies, dealing to them one of the 3 types of elemental damage. It also slows them down. This add-on is useful in case you want to play with Shen Pao skill. The numbers of damage of this add-on are not high, but this is supposed to be a supplementary skill to help a bit in combat, so it is good enough. The numbers of damage at maximum level 6 out of 6 are 115 per type. Chi Realignment. This is a spell which is all about leeching energy from enemies. It applies energy leech and energy drain, and also it stuns them for a while. Energy drain is applied before energy leech and it is something like instant energy leech, whereas energy leech is an overtime effect. The other difference between the two is that this energy drain of this spell also deals some damage to enemies. The damage is based on the amount of the energy the spell drains. What you need to remember is that this effect doesn't stack with similar effects that we get from items, for example rings, because those from items are applied only by weapon attacks, and this is a spell that doesn't use any weapons to work with. Leeching energy of enemies, and especially bosses, helps very much with survivability, because the enemies that don't have enough energy points cannot use their powerful skills on you. This can happen on big bosses too. The very interesting thing about this skill is that the more you level it up, the more its recharge time gets reduced. At maximum level 8 out of 8, the recharge is down to 8.5 seconds. Also, by level ups, you also increase the amount of energy leech and the duration of it, and the amount of energy drain, including the damage of lost energy, which goes up to 250%. The only stat that doesn't change up to level 8 out of 8 is the stun duration. This skill can be useful for every build out there. Reverberation. This add-on will buff up the base skill by adding some frostburn damage over time, skill disruption, and a big amount of slowed effect to enemies. The buff against ghosts works on the frostburn damage of the add-on. Skill disruption is a great mechanic because it stops enemies from casting their powerful skills on you, and this way battles become easier. The other way to stop enemies from casting their skills is, as we said before, to leech their energy so that they cannot cast any. So, this add-on turns the base skill to a very powerful enemy control ability. This add-on is very good and I would spend at least a single point on if I'd choose to use the base skill. Weakest Chakra. This is a spell that you cast on yourself and it has a meter radius of effect. It is powerful since it reduces the damage enemies deal to you and also it reduces their resistances. This reduction to resistances of enemies is multiplicative and will not stack with other skills that provide it, such as Trance of Wrath or Dream Mastery. It also deals some vitality damage, which helps to defeat enemies faster, but it has 2.5 minutes recharge time. This is because it is a powerful skill. By leveling up the skill, you increase its radius of effect and of course the vitality damage number and the numbers of the debuffs to enemies. At level 12 out of 12, the radius of effect will be at 14.4 meters, which is a big amount, 140 vitality damage and 27% to both debuffs. The Petrify effect is fixed at 0.3 seconds and it is almost useless, although it can crowd control some enemies and make battles easier for you. This is a powerful skill and it would be wise to use it, especially if you don't have any other sources of reduction to enemies' damage and resistances. Breath Attack. This spell is mostly about crowd controlling enemies and causing some damage over time. The burn damage is fire burn. The numbers of damage are not high, but they can get increased by attribute points and other skills and items that increase these types of damage. The chance for one of the following means that when this chance triggers one of the two stats, Fear Confusion, will trigger and affect enemies' actions. Fear effect will make them run away from you, and Confusion will make them stop attacking you and moving like zombies, one could say. So both effects can make your life easier. Keep in mind that this is an area of effect skill and it will hit multiple enemies in front of you. So, the chance to trigger will work differently on each one of the enemies that will get hit by a single attack of this skill. So, some enemies will be affected by these two effects, some will not. The chance to fumble attacks works only on melee attacks of enemies and in simple words, it makes them not be able to hit you. The great thing is that even when you max out this skill, the energy cost doesn't go up by a big amount and it is quite cheap to cast. It is a good idea to use the skill as you level up new characters. Voice of the Ancients. This add-on will only add a good number of flat elemental damage to the base spell, but it also adds energy cost. The number of energy cost that we see here will be added to the energy cost of the base skill, and it will make it much more costly now. At level 10 of 10, the energy cost will be 55, and the elemental damage will be 285. The flat elemental damage is divided equally by the 3 elements, so with this add-on, Breath Attack now also deals fire, cold and lightning damage. This will make the skill powerful, and if you want to play a spellcaster based on elemental damage, then it is a great choice. Consequences. This passive skill works only with weapon attacks and skills that use weapons directly, such as Onslaught of Warfare Mastery, Runes Weapon of Runes Mastery, etc. What it does is to apply this debuff, which reduces all primary resistances of enemies. What makes this one really powerful is that it is an absolute value of reduction, which means it stacks with other sources that are absolute or even multiplicative, such as weakest Chakra that we talked about before. So, if you are playing with weapon attack builds, then this passive skill is a must. By leveling up this one, the only thing that changes is the chance to be used. At maximum level 8 out of 8, it will have 17% chance to be used. Mutual Suffering. This add-on will apply the base skill to enemies inside the radius when you kill an enemy that is under the effect of consequences. Leveling up the skill will only increase the radius of effect, which will be 6.17 at level 6 of 6. This add-on is mandatory especially for close combat builds. Terracotta Servants. This is a pet skill that provides terracotta warriors to fight for you. You can have up to 2 summons maximum even at level 20 of 16, which is the ultimate level you can take this skill up to. You will gain access to the second summon when you level up the skill to level 10. This pet is a warrior, so it attacks with melee attacks. It has a basic attack that deals physical damage and a skill which is good enough for a pet. By leveling up the skill, you increase only the health and energy points and the damage of the basic attack. Also, energy cost goes up. Since it is a pet, it can benefit from items that provide bonus to all pets, and from skills that benefit allies. If you'd like to play a pet build, then gear with bonus to pets of physical type of damage would be ideal. Shatter. This add-on is something like an explosion that hits enemies when the pet goes away for whatever reason. Even resummoning the pet after you have reached the summon limit will make the pet explode. This would be a good skill to use in case you wanted to play a pet build where you would have maximum skill cooldowns, so that you would be able to resummon the pet very frequently and use the explosion effect to deal damage and stun your enemies. Of course, it can also be helpful if you don't play a pet build and just have the pet to help you a little bit against your enemies. But if you plan on keeping the pet alive as much as possible, then you shouldn't spend any points on this skill unless you'd like to use the next add-on. Forged by Fire. This is an aura type of skill that applies burn damage to enemies. The aura triggers when your pet engages enemies and it has the duration that we can see in the tooltips of the skill. This duration is fixed and doesn't change by level ups. The physical resistance debuff affects your pet, not your enemies, and it makes the pet more fragile. The good thing about this is that if you want to take advantage of the previous add-on Shatter, then activating this skill will be a great help since it reduces heavily the resistance of the pet, and now it can die easier than before and explode to deal damage and stun enemies. The physical resistance debuff will be minus 76% at level 6 of 6 and minus 109% at level 10 of 6. The meter radius of effect doesn't change by level up, it is fixed. Aura of Tranquility. One more aura of this mastery. The damage absorption it provides works with all types of damage, not just physical, and it is a great stat. The fire retaliation triggers only on enemies that attack you with melee attacks because this is how retaliation mechanic works in this game. And of course the physical and elemental resistances are great to be had. This skill is very powerful, especially for intelligence-based builds that usually don't have the best of physical damage mitigation, but they do have good or great energy regeneration. This skill consumes too much energy, so you need to build on that to be able to use it successfully. This doesn't mean though that you cannot use it with non-intelligence builds. At level 1, the skill costs 5 energy per second, and if we have at least this amount, we can use it at that level and benefit from it. Of course, if you have energy cost reduction, then you can again use it, so there are ways to take advantage of this skill even if you don't play an intelligence-based build. At level 12 of 12, the energy cost will be 12 energy points, which is a big amount, but the skill at that level is really powerful. Melding Armor. This add-on will provide even more survivability, but in the form of avoiding attacks and projectiles. Also, the damage reflected is not a bad stat, but it will not really kill enemies, in case you'd like to use it for this purpose. The problem with this add-on is that it adds more energy cost to the base skill. The energy cost that we see here is added to the one of the aura. If you max out both skills, then the energy cost to have this aura active will be 15 points per second, and if you take both skills to maximum ultimate levels, then the cost will be 20 points. 15 points of the base skill and 5 points of the add-on. Huangdi's Favor. This is a skill which you can assign to your left mouse or right mouse button and use it with a weapon. It works like skills such as Onslaught, etc. It has only one charge level, which means that every time you attack, you deal the amount of total damage of the skill. Also, every attack has a chance to deal some lightning damage to the enemy and also petrify them. This skill can be used with all types of weapons and it is strong enough. Leveling up the skill increases only the total damage and the lightning damage. Spreading Influence. This add-on is pretty much self-explanatory. When you hit an enemy with the base skill, enemies around him will also get hit, so it turns the skill to an area of effect one. It also adds more damage to humankind. This is a new type of racial damage that comes in the game with this new expansion. It means that human enemies will receive much more damage from these attacks. This add-on is mandatory if you don't want to hit a single target with your weapon attacks.